Breaking news. Sheriff's deputy fired following investigation into unjustified shooting. In a dramatic turn of events, a sheriff's department deputy has been terminated following an extensive investigation into an unjustified shooting that has outraged the community and sparked widespread calls for justice. The termination, announced just last week, marks a pivotal moment in the case that has gripped the public and raised urgent questions about the use of force and accountability within law enforcement. The incident, which has drawn scrutiny from the public around the world, happened in Florida, and the Okaloosa County Sheriff Aden fired Deputy Eddie Duran, who fatally shot Senior Airman Roger Fortson back on May 3rd after responding to a possible domestic violence call and being directed to Fortson's apartment. Unbeknownst to him at the time, he had knocked on the wrong door. Duran shot Fortson multiple times 2 seconds after the airman opened his front door. Fortson was holding his legally owned firearm in his right hand, but down by his side, pointed at the ground. A sheriff's internal affairs investigation that was released Friday concluded that Mr. Fortson did not make any hostile, attacking movements, and therefore the deputy's use of deadly force was not objectively reasonable. Outside law enforcement experts have also weighed in, stating that an officer cannot shoot a person simply because a possible suspect is holding a firearm but is no threat. Now, the sheriff came out and said, of course, this is a tragic incident that should never have occurred, and the sheriff claims the objective facts do not support the use of deadly force as an appropriate response to Mr. Fortson's actions. Mr. Fortson did not commit any crime. By all accounts, he was an exceptional airman, and according to the Internal Affairs report, Deputy Duran told investigators that when Fortson opened his door, he saw aggression in the airman's eyes. He said he fired because I'm standing there thinking I'm about to get shot. I'm about to die. The deputy is quoted as saying in the IA investigative report that he was thinking at the time, it is him or me at this point. I need to act. The NAACP also claims that they believe we have not seen the end of this incident, sparking some to believe that charges could soon be filed against the deputy. Now, Duran is a law enforcement veteran, his career beginning as a military police officer in the Army. He was hired by Oklahoma Police Department in 2015 after his military discharge. He joined the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office in July of 2019, but resigned 2 years later. Then he rejoined the Sheriff's Office 11 months ago. When law enforcement was called regarding this possible domestic disturbance, 911 records show deputies had never been called to Fortson's apartment previously, but they had been called to a nearby unit 10 times in the previous 8 months, including once for domestic disturbance, leading a lot of analysts to believe that the officer was directed or unintentionally went to the wrong apartment. When the deputy arrived outside Fortson's door, he stood silently for 20 seconds outside just listening, and as body camera shows, he heard no voices inside. He heard no arguing. He heard no fighting. It was quiet. He then moved to the side of the door, about 5 feet away. He told investigators that he feared that a person inside might fire a gun through the door, or possibly even open the door in a rush and push him over the rail and to the ground about 40 feet below. Now, it's claimed that the airman actually tried to look through a peephole and see who was at his door. But again, since the deputy moved out of view, the airman had no clue who was at his door. And he told his girlfriend, who he was on the phone with, that he was going to grab his firearm because he had no idea what was going on, who was pounding on his door. So in his mind, he wants to be armed for self-defense. Fortson's girlfriend told investigators that the airman asked who was there but did not get a response. She said neither of them heard the deputy yell that he was with the sheriff's office. After the third knock, though, she said Fortson told her, I'm going to go grab my gun because I don't know who that is. And when Fortson opened up the door holding his gun down by his side, pointed directly at the ground, the deputy immediately drew and fired his weapon. And to make matters worse, after the deputy called for paramedics and other officers arrived on scene, did he render aid? No. He walked out of the door and decided to start punching a wall. Did he punch the wall in anger of what he just did to an innocent man? Did he punch the wall out of fear about what he knew could happen to him because he decided to take the life of an innocent man? Comment what you think below. Now that the internal affairs investigation is over, many are speculating that charges should soon follow. After all, the department's own internal affairs investigation does claim that the shooting was unjustified. And so some of you out there, you may be thinking, well, great, they have his own internal affairs testimony. They can use that in court against him. Well, not so fast. Unfortunately, the officer is protected for comments and statements he made in the internal affairs investigation that may not be admissible in court. You see, there's a Supreme Court case called Garrity v. New Jersey from back in 1967, and it is a landmark United States Supreme Court case that established important protections for public employees, including police officers, regarding self-incrimination. Here's a summary of the case. The case involved several police officers in New Jersey who were being investigated for alleged traffic ticket fixing. Possibly taking bribes to fix tickets and make them go away. During the investigation, the officers were questioned by the Attorney General's office, and they were warned that they could be dismissed from their jobs if they refused to answer questions. However, they were not informed that their statements could be used against them in a criminal prosecution. And the issue here is that the main legal question was whether the statements obtained from an officer under threat of a job loss could be used against them in a criminal prosecution later, or whether such use violated the Fifth Amendment's protection against self-incrimination. And in the ruling, the Supreme Court did hold that statements made by officers under threat of termination were compelled statements, and therefore could not be used in criminal prosecutions. The court reasoned that the threat of losing one's job effectively coerced an individual to speak, making the statements involuntary. Now, in that majority opinion, one being Justice Douglas, delivered the opinion of the court stating that public employees cannot be forced to choose between self-incrimination and the loss of their job. The Fifth Amendment's protection against self-incrimination still applies, meaning that statements made under such compulsion are inadmissible in subsequent criminal proceedings down the line. So the key point there is compelled testimony. It's like pointing a gun at somebody saying, I'm going to shoot you if you don't tell the truth and answer my questions. And the decision established that when public employees, including police officers, are compelled to provide statements under threat of a job loss, those statements cannot be used against them in a criminal case. The ruling reinforced the principle that public employees retain their Fifth Amendment rights and cannot be coerced into waiving these rights through threats of an employment loss. The ruling reinforced the principle that public employees still retain their Fifth Amendment rights and cannot be coerced into waiving their Fifth Amendment through threats of employment consequences. Now, the impact of Garrity is that the protections established by this case are now known as Garrity rights. These rights ensure that while public employees can be compelled to answer questions relating to their employment, those answers cannot be used in criminal prosecutions. Law enforcement agencies and other public employees must provide clear warnings to employees when conducting internal affairs investigations, ensuring that employees understand their rights and the limitations on the use of their statements. Garrity v. New Jersey, foundational case that upholds the Fifth Amendment rights of public employees by prohibiting the use of compelled statements in criminal prosecutions, thus balancing the need for internal accountability with constitutional protections. So in other words, if the criminal investigation closes and charges are filed against this deputy in what Internal Affairs views as an unjustified shooting and has now fired the deputy over it, any statements he made during the Internal Affairs investigation are inadmissible. Now, the prosecutor can still file motions with the court to allow certain evidence from the Internal Affairs investigation, but it would be quite the uphill battle to get the court to allow compelled statements from the deputy regarding what was in his head, what was in his mind, why he did the things he did. Direct statements are inadmissible. Again, the prosecutor can try, but most likely a judge would find them inadmissible. But we'll see what happens. Stay tuned for more updates about this case. We'll upload an update to this video if charges down the line are filed against this deputy. Thanks again for watching the Junkyard News. Be careful, people, or we may be talking and sharing a story about you in the next video. Thanks for watching.